Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I hope it's sunny wherever you are tuning in from. This is our first part of our startup showcase. So today we are focused on carbon dioxide removals, and we have two great DAC companies joining us today, as well as Philip Moss. And I'm just going to do a very quick introduction, and then we'll get to the exciting parts of the webinar. So as always, we like to give our land acknowledgement. So with gratitude and respect, we acknowledge that the lands on which we operate are the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And I acknowledge that the land on which I gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many who continue to live and work here today. Please feel free to add your land acknowledgement in the chat. And if you're unfamiliar with Carbon Next, we are a program run by two partners. So I work for Foresight Canada, who is Canada's largest clean tech accelerator, and our partner organization is Carbon Management Canada, and they are the technical expertise for CCUS developments across Canada. Our agenda, so you'll bear with me for 5 minutes while I introduce everything, and then we'll get to our keynote from Philip Moss, talking about the importance of carbon dioxide removal, some challenges, opportunities, very exciting information coming from him. Then we'll have a chance to meet our two ventures. We have Sean Wilson from TerraFixing, and we have Jenny Shaw from Gaia. We'll have our moderated Q&A. If at any point you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat, and I will add it to our list of questions when we get to that segment. And then we'll have a quick closing remarks. So meet our keynote. We have Philip Moss, who is the Global Director for Carbon Removal Markets with South Pole and the Chairperson of the NextGen CDR facility. Philip is an expert in developing new and innovative platforms for climate and development finance, investment, and commercialization. He has over 20 years of experience as a renewable energy and carbon investor and advisor to clean tech companies and projects and public-private platform development. Philip has a broad network spanning financials, industrials, business organizations, NGOs, PPPs, and multinational agencies. And he also has experience in shaping environmental and development policy, business strategy, development, implementation, and public-private collaboration. So just an incredible resume, and we're very excited to have him here today. And with that, I will pass it over to Philip.
Thanks so much for that. Make me sound much better than I am. It's nice to meet you all. As was mentioned, my name is Philip Moss, Global Director at South Pole for activities related to what we have traditionally called technological carbon removals, which we are looking to move away from to some degree, really focusing on the element of long-term carbon removal, which is important, which is on the storage side. That's the South Pole hat. As part of that, I also am chairman, as was mentioned, of NextGen. Let me tell you just very quickly about South Pole a little bit and NextGen to provide some context. I'll then provide you with a little bit of a insight from a buyer's perspective in terms of what the carbon dioxide removal market is shaping up like, and then perhaps provide you with some insights from my personal perspective in terms of where early stage innovators in the space may want to look in terms of developing their business models. So for those who are not familiar, South Pole is a leading climate solutions company. We've operated for over 17 years across 6 continents. We currently have 30 offices globally, providing project development, advisory services, access to different types of environmental assets for carbon avoidance, decarbonization efforts, and now carbon removal alongside other types of assets, such as biodiversity credits and DRECs, domestic renewable energy certificates. As far as NextGen's concerned, this is a venture that we established or announced back in 2021 with Mitsubishi Corporation out of Japan and launched last year at Davos. Effectively, what NextGen is a non-commercial joint venture that we've established to manage a portfolio for multinational companies to help build a global and scalable market for technological carbon removals. We hope by doing this, we are able to provide funding to help companies generate the revenue they need to get the financing, to build commercially, and overcome that valley of death. Right now, within NextGen, we have a number of multinationals that are engaged, which include UBS, Boston Consulting Group, Swiss Re, LGT, which is the private banking group out of Liechtenstein, and an industrial player, Mitsui Shipping, out of Japan. So as far as NextGen goes, we have quite an ambitious goal. We plan to buy about 1 million tons of certified carbon dioxide removals by 2025. We want to ensure that we're committing our capital early to projects so that they can get the financing they need to build out and scale. Three fundamental premises or pillars that we are looking at delivering through NextGen are: one, we want to make this accessible to corporate buyers. And so for that, we have established a target average price across the portfolio that we deliver to buyers of $200 a ton. That means we're buying credits at prices below 200 and above 200. We are able to provide that price target because we have been developing the pipeline for several years. We are aware of many of the projects in the market, their pricing, when they're going to come online. And so we are very comfortable providing that as a price point target. We also want to ensure that what we're doing is aligned with what corporate institutions require. When I say this, I'm talking about the procurement processes that corporations are typically following. So we've developed a diversification strategy for our portfolio that allows our buyers to ensure that they are not locked into specific projects, particularly those projects which have high technological risk. And it also allows the buyers to avoid being exposed to policy risk. For example, implications of a particular sector being subject to changing regulation. We also have our payment structured in such a way that it meets corporate needs. So we have long-term agreements are not typically how corporates buy their carbon credits. And so what we're having to do is kind of work within the context of how corporations typically work to access the funding for these removals. Secondly, we also want to ensure that when we're selling removals to corporates, that we ensure they are credible. This is a key consideration for companies. And as such, what we do require from the companies that we purchase from is that they go through a third-party certification process under an ICROA endorsed standard. The reasons for that are multifold. One, we want to make sure that we have a transparent process. So for those of you that are aware of how these certification processes work, the methodologies have to go through various different types of reviews, both public and internal, before they can be approved. It provides a degree of independence and ensures that we have additionality. The certification processes and the verification processes are all third party, so we don't have those conflicts of interest that we might have if we were a company, for example, developing our own methodology and trying to get that verified. Importance as well for the certification process is that it allows us to provide a degree of fungibility. So buyers are concerned, that they may not get delivery of what they're purchasing. There are different types of buyers in the corporate market. Some are philanthropic in nature. I say the majority of buyers that we talk to are still looking at making sure that they receive an asset in return. So by creating a certified asset, it allows them to kind of fit into their existing accounting practices and commit millions of dollars to help support your companies. Finally, we also want to ensure that we are supporting those companies trying to overcome that valley of death. So there are a lot of early stage companies that are being well supported at the moment through various different types of innovative financing. We feel there's a need to support those companies that are ready to reach commercial scale in the short term and scale up. So we require our companies that with the projects that we're buying from to be able to remove 1 million tons by 2030. We recognize there are a lot of great technologies out there. We can't support them all. And our focus is really on the scalability of the market. And as such, we are obviously focused on projects that are at a later TRL stage and that can come online relatively soon. One of the constraints that we see in the market is there is somewhat of a limited demand from a corporate buyer perspective. And as such, we want to support those projects which we think can get built and deliver. And there's going to be effectively a race in the next few years to capture the current buyer demand before 2025, when a lot of these projects are going to come online. As far as technologies, we cover a range of technologies. It's all terrestrial. So we're looking at obviously the direct air capture technologies out there and storage, I should importantly add. So we have purchased from 1.5, the direct air capture project down in Texas. We've also supported a bikers project, again, in the United States. Summit Carbon Solutions, which is building large infrastructure to transport biomass emissions to a geological storage site. And we have also committed to purchase from Carboculture, a Finnish company that has a very innovative and high technology approach to creating biochar that provides long-term durable removal and storage of carbon. Beyond that, we're also looking at mineralization technologies that we can bring into the portfolio, as well as enhanced rock weathering. At the moment, we haven't done much on enhanced rock weathering. We'd very much like to do something. We need to get a little more comfortable with the certification and methodology side of things before we can move forward on that. So from a market perspective, what does all this mean? I would say, first of all, it's very easy to get blinded by the big numbers that have been popped out there, you know, $1 billion in venture capital that's come into the space. But I would caution that we have to bear in mind that these numbers are not necessarily reflective of the revenue that companies can generate from the market right now. So, you know, Microsoft obviously has done a very big deal recently, 2.76 million tons from a project in Scandinavia. That's about 70% of the overall market, which is around 4 million tons to date. There's only about 13 buyers that have bought more than 10,000 tons. So it's still very illiquid, but that's one of the reasons why NextGen is working with buyers to really help cultivate that demand, bring it forward, bring people along the valley of learning to have them understand why they need to support technological carbon removals today. From a supply perspective, there's been a lot of supply announced. By my accounts, we have a publicly announced pipeline of over 60 million tons that will be coming online by 2030. Why that's relevant is that we don't see the same level of corporate demand at the moment. Corporate demand has primarily been discussed through the VCM. I think that's a bit of a misnomer. I think the corporate buyers are buying on a voluntary basis, but not through the traditional mechanisms of the VCM. And they're really supporting this from the perspective of an innovation slant rather than from what I would call an impact and co-benefit slant. And I think that affects the captive number of buyers that companies can talk to. So right now, based on the discussions that we've had with various different players, we see about 20 million tons of captive demand through 2030. That includes the large captive demand from the likes of the Microsofts and Carbon Directs and JP Morgans of the world. Just to put that into context, we've contracted from 2 projects, which the total supply from those projects would be around 20 million tons. So we do see that the supply and demand curve, as it moves out in the next few years, is going to be very lumpy. You're going to have supply guts and demand guts as things start to catch up. The one key player that's going to influence this, obviously, is the emergence of policy. And we've seen in the United States, and I'm hearing in Canada as well, you know, there's a lot of supportive policy which is changing the dynamics very rapidly for CDRs. So 45Q and IRA in the States, various different tax incentives in Canada. I think the one very interesting recent development, which I see being a bit of a game changer, is the announcement out of the UK that they will include engineered removals, as they're calling it, into their emissions trading scheme. If we can start bringing removals into compliance schemes, that's going to provide price support and demand that we need in order to grow this market. So I will summarize here just with providing a few insights. For companies in the space, I would say, you know, my recommendations to you from an investment and monetization standpoint would be, from a pricing perspective, the first question I keep getting asked is, how much do you want to pay for credits? And I'm like, well, how much do you want to sell them to me for? You know, price is not indicative of quality, right? There are many good quality projects at a low price. There are many bad projects at a very high price. You have a lot of dynamics in terms of funding available to a company which can subsidize the price. What I would say is that I think it's very important to sell early and to validate in the market by making those sales, as well as to put yourself in the buyer's shoes, right? So as buyers looking at this, diversified revenue is a plus. If you're not solely dependent on the carbon removal market, it's a positive thing. We're not selling widgets here, you know, but we still have to fit within the existing procurement processes. And so trying to convince a company to change the way that they procure, I don't think is as productive as trying to figure out what their procurement process is and fitting into it. And then bear in mind that buyers at all costs want to avoid headline risk. So understand your key risks and how they can be managed. Don't shy away from them. The buyers we talk to would much prefer that you understand what those risks are rather than saying we have no risks associated with the project. Credibility is key. You need to have data. If you don't have the data, we're not going to buy from you, and most other companies won't. And if you are looking at monetizing through the carbon removal market, we think certification is critical, and it can take a very long time. So start your process and you're thinking about this earlier rather than later. Lastly, partnership. I think the market is different from other markets. Retail scales aren't scalable. You've got a lot of funding in the space, and you need to move quickly to capture existing demand. So I would encourage you all to use partnerships and associations as you can to help scale up rapidly. And then I would also mention the fact that although you are earlier stage companies, you can't ignore policy. Policy is going to be a critical element in the space. And I would encourage you all to dedicate significant resources to ensuring that the policy is shaped in a way that benefits your companies. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you so much. That was great. The flag on risk is very key. We hear that from industry trying to adopt technologies as well. So it doesn't change between CDR and CCUS. Everyone's worried about risk with a brand new industry coming to the fold. Thank you so much, Philip. With that, I am going to pass it over to Sean from TerraFixing.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sean, and I'm the founder of TerraFixing, and it is a pleasure to be on this call with you today. So, what is TerraFixing? I'm not sure if all you guys know about it. So, can you go next slide? TerraFixing is a direct air capture company that is based out of Ottawa, Canada's capital. And so most of you guys know where that place is, but a lot of people I'm on calls with doesn't know where Ottawa is. Canada, I guess, is relatively cold speaking. I know that there's other places that are colder in Canada, and it has the world's longest outdoor skating rink. And during the winter, our team does enjoy going and skating on the canal. And our team is fueled currently by Tim Hortons and maple syrup, which are abundant at our location. We are a multicultural team with diverse backgrounds, but we are all united in our drive to solve this climate crisis. Next slide. Our team is made up of PhDs, engineers, and serial entrepreneurs. This company was founded based upon some fundamental research that I did during my PhD, and we have been incorporated since 2020. So how did I come up with the idea for TerraFixing? Well, when I graduated from my master's in, When I graduated from my master's in CO2 capture from syngas, I ended up self-securing a lot of research contracts, which I executed at the University of Ottawa, which then turned into a PhD. With my own funding, I could choose whatever topic that I wanted. And in that moment, I believed that direct air capture could be a solution to one of the biggest problems of our time, climate change. And as this was about 9 years ago, there was very few people in the field. And in the end, I feel like most people considered those people crazy. So in some ways, I started out in the DAC field, and I'm kind of one of the older people in it. With my background in absorption and adsorption processes, I ended up seeing many gaps within the field at the time. And one of them was adsorbent-based processes using conventional materials for separation for direct air capture. During my PhD, I knew that I wanted to create a company that would make a meaningful difference once I graduated. So during my whole PhD, I ended up spending a lot of time developing my skills and growing as a person. So I ended up taking entrepreneurship courses during my PhD. I ended up joining the Women's Startup Network at University of Ottawa. I learned how to prototype. I was doing machining. I was learning about mass manufacturing and project execution. And I was just learning about how to patent stuff. And so once I ended up graduating, I ended up starting TerraFixing. Next slide. So on our journey to today, one thing that's really helped us has been our numerous networks and partners, and we have gained significantly from them. So even though I know that all you guys kind of know about this, I'll jump into direct air capture and why do we need it. So next slide, please. So direct air capture is capturing the CO2 from the air And as you guys know, the CO2 within the air acts as a greenhouse gas. And as these greenhouse gases increase, so does the frequency and severity of natural disasters. Climate scientists tell us that it's not only important for us to cut our emissions, but we also need to remove a lot of the emissions that are already in the atmosphere. And direct air capture can help us with both of those points. First of all, direct air capture allows us to remove CO2 from the atmosphere, allowing us to decouple the source of the CO2, like an airplane or a factory, from the CO2 capture step. And I think one of the best parts about this is that it's also independent of time. So we can capture the CO2 before it's emitted, after it's emitted, or while it's being emitted. And because of this, it kind of allows you to target all CO2 emission sources and have a very major impact on climate change. But where you place your technology for direct air capture has a huge impact on the potential as well as the scalability of your solution. So you need to choose wisely. Next slide. So if I had to say like any take-home message today, it would be at TerraFixing, we firmly believe that the future of DAC is in cold climates because there's so many benefits to capturing carbon in cold climates. So let me paint the picture for you. Next slide. So what's so good about the cold? Well, if you were to ask Albert Einstein where to locate a direct air capture facility between the scorching hot Sahara Desert or the freezing polar north, he would probably say, well, of course you'd locate the DAC facility in the freezing polar north. It'd be more thermodynamically favorable there. Other than separations being more favorable in cold conditions, there are other fundamental benefits that make cold climates really good for capturing CO2 from the air. Some other advantages besides these include, next slide. When I do this, I was trying to do the next slide, by the way. It's scalability. The first thing that cold climates has to offer is renewable power that has yet to be tapped, and it's very abundant. And if you go from the equator and you move closer and closer to the poles, you start realizing that the wind power potential becomes extremely high close to the poles. And these are the best winds in the world, 100 to 1,000 times better than almost anything that you've seen when you've seen a wind turbine, just like in person. And anyways, we want to use these winds that have yet to be tapped to provide clean, cheap wind power, and a lot of it for when we're scaling up to the gigaton scale. The second thing that a lot of these cold climates also have are CO2 storage reservoirs. So a lot of these reservoirs are astonishingly vast and can store the world's amount of CO2 within them. And another benefit of these storage reservoirs in Alaska, Greenland, many parts of Canada and Antarctica is that they're not riddled with holes like Swiss cheese, which makes it have a lot more certainty that when you pump the CO2 down in the ground in one spot, that there isn't some unknown well that's been drilled before just leaking out your CO2 that's like a kilometer down the road type of thing. So now that the final piece of this puzzle, to capitalize on these two opportunities, you need to have a technology that can survive in the cold and thrive. And so that's TerraFixing. We have specifically designed our technology for it to take advantage of this opportunity. Next slide. We are the only company that has been specifically designed for direct air capture in cold climates. Other technologies you might have heard are doing some remarkable work in the DAC field, but they have limitations when operating in freezing conditions. So if any country that has a real winter's hope to achieving its emission reductions targets, it needs a DAC technology that operates in the cold, and that's where TerraFixing comes in. Next slide. To give you an idea of what our unit looks like and how we capture the CO2 from the air, on the top right is what we're currently building. It's our pilot unit and can capture about 1,000 tons of CO2 per year. And eventually we will build the full scale commercial unit, which is on the bottom right, which fits into a standard shipping container. This unit is about 1/4 of the size of the competitor's unit and can capture about 4 times the amount of CO2 to kind of show you the difference in scales that we can achieve. Next slide. Currently at Terrafixing, we have a location and permitting already in place at our pilot location, as well as many of the places within our pipeline. However, this is really all on our path to getting to gigaton deployment in a favorable freezing cold location. Next slide. One of the challenges that we faced at Terrafixing is making sure that you have a viable business model. And so in the end, I guess the way that we looked at the problem was in terms of determining the main value that's distinguishing us versus the competitor, as well as low-hanging fruits for our business. And so in the end, I think one thing that we noticed is that we kind of bring some of the highest quality CDR credits in the space. And in some ways, I feel like we are the top one. And as well as we're able to produce very clean, pure CO2. And so with that, we target our customers, showing that we have this incredible value of the CO2 that we're producing that other competitors can't meet, as well as if you want something like food grade or beverage grade CO2 or medical grade CO2, that we can also be a provider of that, especially in places that currently don't have CO2 infrastructure. So with this knowledge in hand, it really helped frame our business and how we're going to be moving forward. So to the last slide. So I'm going to reiterate. The future of affordable gigaton direct air capture is in cold climates, and Terrafixing can provide the solution. And I'd like to thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sean. Very interesting technology, uniquely cited for the cold climates. Definitely something we experience here in Canada. So that's awesome to hear about.
The cold doesn't need to be a bad thing, right? At Terrafixing, we think it's the solution to the problem.
Thanks, Sean. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Jenny. She is from Guy Refinery, another DAC technology based out of the east coast of Canada, and I'll leave it to her to talk about her technology.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much to Foresight Canada and everybody here today. I'm going to follow Philip's lead and just be a little bit more informal with no slide deck and talk to you about Guy Refinery. So we define our technology as a bioenergy-driven direct air capture technology. So the key, which I'll get to, is the unique innovation is the bioenergy-driven part. And I'm bringing my Tammy's respects, my business partner and the technical CTO and founder of Guy Refinery, is off doing some research on a site for our next steps in R&D. And Tammy has a PhD in environmental engineering and specialized in biotechnology. And she developed this technology from her interdisciplinary background and insights and experience. And from what I know, and she's told me to share with you, that it was this lens of chemistry and biotechnology that allowed her to look at direct air capture in a new way, which is very exciting. So Guy Refinery, what's our core technology? Our core technology and value proposition is basically in direct air capture, you capture the carbon dioxide, and then there's a desorption phase. And this desorption phase is generally takes a lot of energy, but we have an innovation that uses waste acetic acid to act as a neutralization step for the first desorption of the carbon dioxide. And then it goes through acetate microbial fuel cell. And this is exciting because it creates system usable energy and regenerates our sorbent, so the sodium hydroxide that we use to capture carbon dioxide. So, we could spend this whole call on the technology part of it, but we won't. And there's lots of cool diagrams to go along with this. But that really, for us, addresses one of the direct air capture's key issues of high energy requirements and finding green energy at that. And so the second part that Gaia Refinery is really excited about is this value chain of utilizing acetic acid and needing that input feedstock provides us the opportunity to have an adaptive deployment. And we need to develop this for sure, but we can position Gaia Refinery in the direct air capture in a couple of spaces. One is the carbon dioxide removal space and sequestration, work with partners to sequester, but it also allows us to maybe deploy with industry. So move from the carbon to value market. And so that we can use their waste streams and then produce carbon dioxide for them. And as Philip said, our revenue model is, the carbon credits, but we're also looking to have byproducts through a biomass pre-treatment step, but also this carbon to value product potentially too, as we move along to prove out our technology. We were asked when we were to talk today about some of the challenges, and I've talked about what makes Gaia Refinery unique. And the challenges are just, I think, general growth questions. So you develop the technology, and then soon enough, you need to add a line to develop the business value chain and keep on top of policy and keep on top of your revenue model. So it's about growing and using your time wisely. And one thing that I guess advice we have, or we've learned and we try to stick to, is at any stage of the company's at, is to know your key success factors. And the knowledge there is any company can only really have 3 key success factors to get you to the next stage. So understanding and knowing where to spend your time and energy has helped us. And to share with you where we're at, it's fundraising to push our technology to the next level. So fundraising is number 1 of our key success factor right now. And then it goes into making sure our technology is at the TRL deployment stage, so promoting that in R&D. And the third is the value chain development, the partnerships that are going to get us there. In order to get us there, we can't say enough about accelerators and programming in the Canadian atmosphere that have helped us grow our understanding, provided connections and relationships and funding too, in some regards. So that's been one of the huge things that has helped us along the way. And I guess we're going to go into Q&A. So maybe I'll just leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jenny. I'm very excited to have you on the call. We have some good questions in the chat. So I think with that, we can hop over to our Q&A period for all of the panelists. Philip, I'll put you on the spot first. What do you forecast for the new companies entering the market beyond 2025?
A lot of uncertainty is probably the best answer I can give you. There's so many moving pieces right now. Again, I think in terms of taking this market to gigaton scale, we really need the policy drivers to do that. As I said, from talking to the UK, it looks like they will have something coming online 24, 26. The EU is probably going to be after that. As far as the North American market goes, they've made a significant amount of commitments. Whether those will continue or not remains to be seen. I think we are starting to see some changing dynamics with some of the key players in the space. So one of the key initiatives for buyers is the Science-Based Targets Initiative, which is kind of dictating what it means to be net zero. They haven't provided the right sort of guidance that we would need right now to really motivate the market, but they are opening up discussions around this. It's a slower process than we would like. So we're hopeful that we can get those voluntary and compliance drivers moving in the right direction to build the market for earlier stage technology companies. But I would say, any company that won't be in a position to sell anytime soon should really try and engage with buyers now, simply because I think there will be this lumpiness in terms of, a shortfall of demand come 25, 26. And then, those companies that haven't got purchases are really going to struggle to start making the first sales after that. So I don't want to sound negative, but I think it's heavily dependent on policy drivers.
Great, thank you, Philip. Maybe we'll pass it over to Sean or Jenny, whoever wants to take this one first. What advice would you give to other entrepreneurs looking into the CDR space?
I can start. It depends on what stage you're at, type of thing. Like, I guess if I had to talk about my own experience, I think it was kind of unique. I started off and then like I was right at the edge of the field with my PhD. So I saw where all the gaps were. And I think that there's a lot of value to like spending your time to really kind of learn about your field and where you're unique and like how your solution can become this amazing thing. And I'd say one nice thing is if you can get, you know, a partnership with depending on, I guess, if you're, you know, going at it from the business perspective, getting a partnership real quickly and just testing out your idea to see if it works is also, I think, something that is fundamentally important as well.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I just to add to that, it is hard. I think what I realized coming into the CDR space, there's so many arms and branches of learning that it's easier if the question was specific CDR finance or technology or business development. There's lots, and then there's just general entrepreneurial helpfulness. My background is clarity and organizational design, so I think the more you can keep your internal business organized, it will help you figure out what your next best steps are.
Great, thank you. Passing it back over to Philip. Where do you see future demand for carbon dioxide removal? Where are the biggest markets?
This is where the time scale comes into play, right? So it's very difficult to kind of pigeonhole it and say this is where demand is. I think post 2030 is going to be very different from pre 2030. You know, we're getting all the right signals right now that there's a recognition that carbon removal needs to be part of the picture, which 12 months ago we didn't have, to be perfectly frank. So I think it will be very positive. I think it will be focused on the compliance markets. In the short term, I think it will be challenging, right? I think there are a number of boxes to tick. We have lots of different projects, different technology companies out there. And unfortunately, I think it will be a case of many of the first movers that will be successful in continuing to access the market, get the revenues, raise funding. You know, validation by the market is a critical element here. So it's going to be lumpy until 2030. And then post 2030, I think it looks quite promising as we're starting to get some traction with the different regulatory entities.
May I ask a follow-up question to Philip? Is the validation the market validation from like having purchases stronger than your technology methodology being verified? Is there one that is stronger?
So, I mean, from our perspective, we need the methodology to have confidence that the technology can get there. I would say buyers that we talk to are probably more tolerant of technological risk than they are of, as I said, headline risk, right? So the credibility of that removal and the methodology around that. So I think, you know, if you have data to support it, I don't think you need to necessarily have anything in commercial state today, but you do need data, you do need a robust methodology. It helps to go through a certification process to provide comfort to buyers. And then you can work out the kinks on the road. At the end of the day, you know, this sector is a little bit different. It's not necessarily, you know, the same as the other voluntary carbon market sectors in terms of co-benefits and impact financing. As I mentioned before, there's a recognition that this is R&D and innovation focused. And so if you can provide comfort to buyers that you have the right corporate processes and approaches to be able to test and deliver a functioning technology down the road, I think there's a little more flexibility in terms of that technological, those technological aspects, provided that it can fit within a methodological framework.
Can I ask a question to you, Philip?
Sure.
Yeah. So in the end, I'm looking at the DAC space. I guess there's two main certifiers for us right now, right? There's like Puro and ACR, the two ones that came up with good methodologies. But then there's a lot of self-certifiers. And I noticed some of your clients fall underneath the self-certification branch. Do you try
No.
to none of them are falling underneath there?
So every project we contract with will go through an ICROA endorsed standard.
Okay.
Right? So we are working with one will be going through Puro, one will be going, I can't say which standard, but it will be a voluntary standard, and one has already submitted the methodology for public consultation under the gold standard. As far as those standards and certification methodologies go on the DAC side, we've been involved in a process for over a year, recognizing that there was this lack of a methodological framework for direct air capture and storage. It's called the CCS Plus initiative, and they've just released the methodology for public consultation. We're talking to a number of the different standards bodies about adopting this methodological framework, which would allow companies like yours to go through that certification process with a methodology that is based on 50 years of data in some cases from a storage perspective, to make sure that we are getting those numbers right.
Thank you for that. I actually have one more question. So in the end, one thing I'm learning about the field is I can't mention which companies they are, but they're selling their credits to you along with the shirts off their backs. Do you guys jump really deeply into looking at the costs to make sure that they're not like selling it, but then not actually being able to make profit off of it?
So, I mean, some of the projects we're buying a portion of the overall volume. We don't necessarily expect that what they sell it to us at will be what they sell to the rest of the market at. So I wouldn't say we're taking the shots off anybody's backs here. At the same time, you have to bear in mind that there's 13 companies that have bought more than 10,000 tons. Many of whom are part of NextGen, and what they don't want to suffer is kind of a first mover disadvantage, right? They don't want to have to pay a premium price today for everyone else to benefit from down the road. I think in some cases it makes sense, particularly if you have additional sources of funding, to be able to validate your sales in the market so that you can then sell at a price which ensures that you don't have to take the shirts off your back. But yeah, I wouldn't say we're robbing anyone blind. There are a lot of market dynamics. You have inflation now, which is changing the numbers. But part of what we do in terms of our assessment is also looking at the viability of the project to ensure that we think it can deliver. So we have two very, very large projects with a lot of well-funded, deep pockets that can deliver some of these projects. We've also off-taken from Carboculture, which is a much smaller project. The pricing and cost dynamics are very different for a smaller innovative company than they would be for a multi-billion-dollar project.
Thanks, Philip. Maybe I'll take it back over and give Philip a chance to catch his breath over there. So let's take an audience question. I know, Jenny, you responded in the chat, but maybe we can talk about this on the recording. So where is the best suitable location for reliable supply of waste biomass?
Yes, it's a great question. There's a lot of caveats to that. So we are looking at woody biomass and agri-biomass to pre-treat into the creation of acetic acid as our feedstock. And so we haven't identified, I guess, long story short, we haven't identified the one best answer or place for that. It's about working with different partners and seeing what process can come from that. We're also hopefully being able to find some partnerships where we use the biomass that is required in other products like wood pellets or biochar, do the pre-treatment to get our feedstock, but also leave them with a higher value product. So it's kind of a win-win situation. So there's no, we haven't got to the answer of where is the best reliable source of waste biomass. I think a number of people would love to know that answer. And globally there's multiple. It's just how you want to use it, how you need to use it. And we want to partner with people so that we're not utilizing the best of the entire product.
Great, thank you. We'll take another audience question. This one's for Sean. Is Terrafixing planning on developing their own projects as opposed to licensing their tech out to a developer, such as Deep Sky?
This is the question that haunts us all in some senses. Half the problem is that we need to pay for our initial developments, but it's one of those things in our future that we're thinking about licensing as an option, but we haven't been settled upon it. So if you look at a company like Climeworks, for instance, there's a reason why they're building their first plants before licensing it. And Carbon Engineering, they built a couple small things before licensing out their thing. So it's more like a long-term option that we're going to be aiming for. But in order to get the IP and all the uncertainties on the technological side down, that we're funding it. And we're hoping that we can get at least any CO2 that we do capture from going down this kind of pipeline, that we can sell it to customers out there, show that the business model also works.
Great, thank you for that. I think this one's for Philip. Are you seeing a lot of international REC transfers or more so within a specific country?
Well, I probably couldn't talk too much about renewable energy certificates. Not really my area of expertise. So I might pass on that question.
And then Sean, I saw that you also responded to this in chat, but other than the PhD, how can one start learning about DAC and CDR, the industry, so they can work on their own technology?
Yeah, so in the end, I think the big thing is like talking with people, like, joining a community. And like, if you have an idea, it's literally just look up like people in the field of your idea and just talk with them. They're 99% likelihood they're not going to even think about stealing your idea, and you're going to go to them and you're going to learn so much about from their opinions that's probably going to improve your idea even further. And if I had to say one community to join in the DAC/CDR space, it's air miners. And that community, there's so many good references and resources and people, and it's very active. And you can learn a lot about the space there, as well as they also have a little incubator, which can be very useful if you're just starting out as well, to make sure your ideas and everything kind of work.
I would say, I think one of the interesting things about the CDR space is it has grown up in a very collaborative, open systems way. And so, we were all trying to create a brand new market here, which requires a lot of different players. There's a lot of information online. If you look at, for example, what Frontier is doing in publishing some of the projects that they're purchasing from. There's different organizations. There's one, Carbon Removal Canada, I believe. There's the Carbon Business Council in the US, the DAC Coalition. I mean, there's tons of different organizations. And it is a collaborative and open type of environment. So I would second that, and just say, reach out to someone in the space. I mean, we don't have enough talent in the space as it is. So I'm sure anyone who's interested in learning more about it will be welcomed with open arms.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. That's something we noticed within the CarbonX community as well, as everyone likes to network, likes to talk with each other. We actually had two ventures kind of join together. So that was an interesting development for us. So it's definitely a very small community, and people love to talk about it. Let's take a little bit of a different lens. Are we looking at any removals of GHGs other than carbon dioxide? Maybe that's a question for Philip.
And it's actually a very good question. It's one of the questions that I asked. So, 15 years ago, I was in the CDM, Clean Development Mechanism market, which is the compliance predecessor to what we're pushing for today. Yeah, I mean, GHGs, obviously, there are other GHGs that make a big impact. I think if you look at just the quantity of carbon in the atmosphere, and the fact that many of these GHG gases actually dissipate and become carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the focus as far as carbon removals today is really on the carbon itself, rather than other GHG gases. So I think the goal is really to try and limit the emission of the GHG gases at source, and then take carbon and dissipated other types of GHG gases out of the atmosphere to recover from our historic emissions.
Great, thank you. I don't know if Jenny or Sean, you want to add to that? No? Okay, awesome. Another question for Philip, actually. So in which of the following jurisdictions do you consider the policy drivers for CDR to be clearest? Europe, the UK, US, Canada, EU, Australia, etc.
Well, I'll take some liberties with this question. I think to date, the driver has really been the US market. The US coming out with 45Q and the IRA changed the dynamics of everything. Everyone's playing catch up right now. We just had an event in France recently where they've just started to look at CCUS and make some commitments around removals. But I would say Europe is very far behind the US. I have my questions as to whether that can be maintained and continued in the US, but I think there's been a big push right now, a lot of support specifically for direct air capture technologies and direct air capture hubs. But we'll see whether that momentum remains, particularly, we've got an election coming up next year. Who knows what will happen then? In terms of where I see the most potential moving forward from a market perspective, I would say it is the UK. If the UK brings this into the emissions trading scheme, it's going to change the dynamics. Now you're going to have a whole new set of potential corporate buyers either having to or having the option to buy CDRs, which will create this demand signal, which will drive investment. There's a limited amount of projects that can be developed in the UK, so it remains to be seen whether they would buy cross-nationally. But we're in discussions right now with different governments about doing some cross-national transactions. So it's not outside of the realm of question. But yeah, I would say the US definitely would love to see more activity in Canada. I'm glad to hear it's coming along. But I think the next big driver will be the UK announcement in terms of how they include CDR into their emissions trading scheme.
Great, thank you. We do have another question for Sean. Can you comment on matching renewable electricity supply to operating the DAC units? For example, are you using average emission intensity? Or do you have a method or tool to match intensities with DAC operating times?
Yes. So I guess a key premise is direct air capture. For it to be negative, the energy you're using also has to be clean and green. So in the end, we're lucky that in our pipeline, that at least our first location is right next to one of the largest hydroelectric facilities in Canada. So, and it's providing like very cheap electricity, which is also good. But when we go further and further north, we're going to go to locations that we're going to actually be directly tied into renewable energies like wind. So we did a life cycle assessment, and we have a life cycle assessment just for the wind turbine itself. And then some elements of the life cycle assessment for the plant change based on the number of wind turbines we're going to be placing there, because there's fixed costs. Like you'd be surprised if you place one wind turbine, there's more emissions from like everything else. Like you have to bring one full crane no matter what type of thing. You have to build a pad just to put the crane on there to lift up the one wind turbine and do all these other but when you have more and more wind turbines, these costs kind of decrease. So we have this little equation that we use to figure out how many emissions that are being produced that would be considered either scope 2 or scope 3.
Thank you. And then we have a question for Jenny. Thoughts on the new federal mixed solid waste methane reductions program? Does Gaia have the ability or plans to participate?
I'm not aware of this, to be honest. The methane reductions program, I'll have to look into it. Thank you for letting me know about it.
Thanks, Stephen. That's all right for the Q&A. Thank you for participating. Maybe I'll give you a little bit easier of a question then, Jenny. What keeps you motivated to continue persevering through the tech development journey? As we know, entrepreneurship is never the easiest route you can take.
It isn't. I've had a few entrepreneurial go rounds, and I think just the potential. I do think the community, the passion of the positivity and opportunities in carbon dioxide removal is exciting. I would love to say, and it's so true, that my partnership with Tammy makes it enjoyable. You know, partnerships and the relationships you have internally and externally make you want to push forward. And I'll just end by Hannah. I follow Hannah Ritchie, who does a blog post weekly, and she has this article that says, "We need optimism to make progress." and that I think we're all optimistic, changeable people where the future can be better if we work hard to change it. So we need to put the work in, but it's doable. And I like that perspective. That keeps me going.
Thank you. Sean, do you have anything to add about that?
Well, Jenny answered it a lot better than what first came to my head. I was gonna be like chocolate and ice cream. But I guess it's like, I don't know, you get in life, you get used to rejection and, you know, not a positive response every time you do something. You just gotta accept that as being kind of a normal, and it's not bad at all. And I don't know, it's like changing your psychology of the situation. But definitely, like now that Jenny's spoken, I'm all gonna say my team's amazing. I really enjoy them. It's cool to have a community, I think, that's with you. So
That's great. Thank you so much. We're about to wrap up here. Does anyone have any final thoughts that they haven't had a chance to talk about yet? Putting everyone on the spot. So I'm just going to do our closing remarks then. So our next steps for Carbon Next, we have recently released our year 1 report. So it looks over the different ventures that we've supported over the last year, the inaugural year of our programming, the 2 different accelerators, both TerraFixing and Gaia are part of this. We're very grateful for them. We have our next edition of Carbon Talks in August. So it'll be very similar to this, looking at MMV and mineralization. And then if you would like to stay in touch with our different ongoings, please sign up for our Carbon Next newsletter. It is a snapshot into the different events, opportunities, and news pieces that are going through the industry every month. Thank you so much for coming.